Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to the first National Grassroots Conference Call of the year. If we've got anybody new on the call, a particularly warm welcome to you. If we haven't met, my name is Oxley. I'm the Executive Director of Results UK. Is there anybody else that wants to introduce themselves, particularly if you've not been on one of these calls before?
Yeah, I've just started. So I've just joined Mark in the Norwich team.
Great, welcome.
Hi, my name's Glenn. I've just joined the Edinburgh team. This is my first meeting as well.
Hi, Glenn, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David and I've just joined the Birmingham team.
Magnificent.
Hi, from Brighton, we've got our first group here.
Sorry, what was that? I had a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Sorry, we're saying hello from Brighton. We're having our first group kick-off meeting. There's a few of us. Maybe we'll just run around and say our first names. Yeah. That might take a little while. Okay, you got Hugh.
Yes.
Olu.
Josh.
Laura. Sid. Yoasha.
Finley.
Hello.
Wow, that sounds like you've got a very full room of people. Magnificent, Brighton. It's a lovely town. So glad to have you on the call. Is there anybody else who wants to say hi?
We've got somebody new here in Oxford.
So I'm as well. Leading my direction.
Great. Very good. And lots of returning faces as well. Hi, Brighton. We see you on video now. Wonderful. Yeah, it's really great to see and to have so many people returning as well, particularly as it's the first call of the year. Before we get going, I'm just going to let you know why I might sound a little further away than I might normally do and why it's quite light here compared to where all of you are. It's actually because right now I'm sitting inside the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation offices in Seattle. The Gates Foundation are a huge supporter of so many of our priorities, and they've given literally billions of dollars to support exactly the same things that we care so much about, be that fighting tuberculosis, HIV, malaria, through contributions to the Global Fund, eradicating polio, or vaccinating kids against terrible but preventable diseases. They do all of that. I'm actually here with colleagues from different results from all around the world and other action partners in other countries even more. We're here for three reasons. First, I'm here to take a little bit of a bow for all of your fabulous successes. When we last year we collectively secured £1.4 billion for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. We got another £400 million in 2019 to help end polio, just to name two high-profile successes. The people in the foundation took note, and the sounds of your successes are literally being heard all around the world, and everybody really wants to know exactly how we managed to pull that off. Second, I'm here to plan. If this isn't your first results call tonight, then you'll almost certainly know that we have a big 2020 lined up, with the UK hosting the Gavi replenishment and the Nutrition for Growth event happening later on in the year in Tokyo. We're always more successful in these efforts when we can plan and coordinate with our key allies from around the world. And third, and a little cheekily, we're here to ask for some money from the foundation. They're a major funder for the Action Global Health Advocacy Partnership, of which Results UK is a member. And of course, we're incredibly thankful to the foundation for their support. Of course, we've still got so much still to do, and we're keen that the foundation maintains that support of our priorities. I don't want to jinx it, but I think the meetings are going pretty well, so I'm really glad to be here. But I'm going to move on quickly to an overview of what's going on in the world and the politics that affect our work at Results. So, big exhalation. The general election is over. We have a new government. It has a clear mandate. And it has some policies that will affect the work that we do to advocate for changes that will help alleviate global poverty and will have an impact on people's ability to access the health and education services and the economic opportunities they need to look after themselves and their families. Now, some government policies and commitments made over the last year will clearly have a very beneficial impact, such as the renewed financial support for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria, and the Global Polio Eradication Initiative I talked about earlier, both of which are materially going to help low-income countries improve their work on health and to meet Global Goal 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals, health and well-being for all. For those of you that are new to Results, we're really proud to say that Results campaigners, so many of the people on the call tonight, played a really big part in persuading the government to continue to support these vital and important initiatives last year. And we've got really, really credible evidence that your letters, your visits to MPs, conversations with politicians of all political parties made a really big difference to the government's decision on the level at which to continue to support these initiatives. However, there's some other policies or shifts of direction from the current government that we're concerned about as being potentially quite negative. And this is something where we're also going to need your help to ensure that the important development work that we've done and the important development gains we've made don't get compromised or rolled back. So first, most of you are regular attendees on this call will know that we don't agree with the shift over recent years of the focus of UK aid spending away from a focus on poverty reduction to supporting broader and less focused economic development initiatives, and also the shift to use aid in the UK's national interest in ways that could risk or compromise its impact on poverty reduction, which should still be, by law, its primary focus. So I'm sure some of you saw news reports around Christmas time and also again over the last week or so about the rumours that the government planned to merge the Department for International Development, or DFID, with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the FCO, as part of a wider Whitehall shake-up. Results is at one with many of the other voices in the international development sector who are clear this is a very bad idea, and we've got loads of arguments and evidence to point to exactly why this is the case. Now, at the moment, while there's been a statement from a number 10 spokesperson that the merger won't go ahead, there is to be a review of the UK's foreign affairs, defence and international development policies later in the year. And the most recent rumour is that the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, could also head up international development as well as the FCO. I'm not going to say too much more about the ins and outs of all this now because we've got an expert speaker who I'm going to introduce in a few minutes who's going to tell us a lot more about what this kind of change, if it does happen, could mean for the things that we're going to try and achieve in terms of changing the world. But for now, what we're going to do is put a couple of links in the chat box to some of the press reports so you can see for yourself the kind of speculation that's in the air at the moment, which I hope shows why we think we need to mobilise as an entire sector in support of the UK's world-leading and absolutely excellent aid work. For those of you on the phones, when we share the recording of this call, you can find all the links and resources that we share in terms of putting things into the chat box in the description of that. So don't worry if you don't have access to the Zoom chat box at this very second. Now, we're going to hear in just a few, as we'll also hear in a few minutes, we're very hopeful that in the first half of this year, the UK is going to put some very significant financial resources into global efforts to provide essential vaccines to all children, no matter where they live, saving millions of lives and preventing millions of needless child deaths through its support for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. Again, Gavi is very familiar to those who've been with Results for more than a few months, but shortly I'll introduce a second expert speaker who can give us an overview of how this important international collaboration works for those of you who are new to Results, and then be able to answer some questions about how we can help improve access to vaccination in poor countries via the UK's support for Gavi. Some of you will be aware the UK is actually hosting Gavi's replenishment in early June. The world will be coming to London. Quite exciting. Again, I won't say too much more about this now, but we want to leave plenty of time to hear from our two speakers. I do just want to mention another priority on global health that Results will be asking you to take action on very shortly. And right now we're expecting the subject of our next monthly Grassroots Conference Call. That's happening on Tuesday, the 4th of February. I'll tell you the date again at the end, but it's on Tuesday, the 4th of February. That's only 3 weeks away now since we moved this call back because of the Christmas and New Year's break, because we wanted to give you guys a wee bit of a rest before kicking into it in high gear now here on the 14th of January. So that other health thing that we're going to be talking about next month is the important fight against malnutrition in all its forms. A very strong supporter of malnutrition is the Labour peer, Lord Ray Collins of Highbury. He's just tabled an oral question on this topic in the House of Lords. He's also been an active member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Global Nutrition. Lord Collins has just had an article published in Politics Home about what's called nutrition-sensitive interventions. These are the bits of development work which, if they're done in a joined-up way, help people to avoid malnutrition in addition to whatever other objectives they're looking to achieve, such as, for example, improving sanitation facilities or improving agricultural practices. At a time when UK aid spending is under really strong scrutiny, it's really important to understand how a single investment can have impact in more than one way, achieving more without additional spending and maximising that impact of every pound that we are spending. Now, Lord Collins expresses this really clearly. So again, we're just going to put a link to that article in the chat box and it'll be on the call recording for you to see. It's also worth taking a moment to give a shout out to Results' own Tom Gughar. He's our Parliamentary Advocacy Officer for Nutrition. He supported Lord Collins at his request to help him produce such a strong piece. So now, we know that in the real world, all the different development issues are interlinked. Development is highly complex. So for example, we know that progress in education is dependent on having good nutrition. We know how successful vaccination is impacted by malnutrition. We know that patterns of disease and economic livelihoods are affected by climate change. Now, it's important to be aware of these complexities, even though as advocates, we don't all need to be deep development experts. And I say this to remind us that even though each month we tend to focus on the kind of the one particularly powerful, effective thing that we want to achieve right now, we must always be reminding ourselves how all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, reaching them by 2030, we're not going to get there by reaching them all individually. We need to be reaching them collectively and together. Lord Collins' opinion piece in Politics Home describes this interlinkage and the interweaving of these goals really well. So please do check it out and also keep your eye on Results' Twitter feed because we'll be sharing this piece there and we'd love to get it seen by as many people as possible. Look, that's it for me right now. I'm going to hand over to Della to give you the usual roundup of all your advocacy activities around the UK over the last month. Over to you, Della.
Thanks, Aaron. For anyone who's new on the call and doesn't know, I'm the campaigns coordinator at Results. So if I haven't been in touch with you yet, it'd be great to hear from you about how you found the call. But going back to the subject of the Department for International Development and the Foreign Office potential merger, recently Karen from Macclesfield had a great letter published in the Daily Mail on the subject of defending UK aid. I wondered if, Karen, you wanted to share a bit about what you wrote and how you found the process. I can see that you're on the call. I'm not sure if you got that. I'm going to unmute you. I don't know if you were trying to say something, Karen, but I have unmuted you now. So you should be able to share. Okay, I'm having trouble hearing you, so I'll come back to you at the end. Sorry. Maybe. Oh, I'm seeing that I should be able to hear you.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Yes, I was just saying that you probably can't see us because by opening the chat box, we've managed to turn the camera off. And I can't. And I'm afraid I can't see you either. I could only see around the edge of you, so it's a bit awkward. But yes, what happened was I saw a Daily Mail headline which said, "Now end the foreign aid farce, Boris." And there was another headline just inside saying, "Taxpayers' cash going to China brings British aid spending into disrepute." And I sort of walked off after seeing it feeling cross and then thought, actually, I'm going to do something about this. I went back and bought the Mail, which I don't usually do, and then spent the next morning writing a letter in response to their arguments that aid should be reduced and the Department for International Development should be merged with the Foreign Office. I used a lot the article that was in The Guardian and was put up by someone on Results about how to write a letter. I pretty well followed their advice about how to do it, and then used a couple of facts from their from Results about good things aid had done, and sent it off. It didn't appear for a few days. I had my parents, who do actually get the Daily Mail, looking for it, and it actually appeared a few days afterwards in a debate section. But it was the only letter in favour of aid. Previous letters that week had all been against aid, and the other 5 letters in that debate were all against aid. So I was the lone voice, which was quite exciting, but also a bit depressing that I was the only one either writing in or publishing about it.
It was really nice to see that there was some positivity there, though. So congratulations on getting published. It was really great to read. I don't have a link, but if you are in our closed Facebook group, I will put a link in the chat box. You can see the photo of the print that Karen uploaded.
There was a link because you put it on Facebook, didn't you?
I did put it on Facebook, yes, but it was in a closed Facebook group, yes.
But there is a link. There is a URL.
I'll double check that, but I'll put a link.
Oh, it was a scan. Actually, what I put in there was a scan of it, not the URL in the end.
Yes, so you can see it in the Facebook group. I'll pop a link in. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Great to hear from you. So the general election might feel like it's ancient history now to a lot of you, but I wanted to mention some amazing work that Sophia in London had recently got up to. She organised a hustings for the parliamentary candidates in Vauxhall, which is where the results office is based, and also in her own constituency in Lewisham. I know you're on the call, Sophia. Did you want to share a little bit about how you found that experience?
Yeah, sorry, I've timed my dinner really badly. Yeah, no, I organised 2 hustings, one in my constituency in Lewisham and Penge, and one in Vauxhall, which is where my friend lived. And I just was really frustrated by that there was just nothing around my area. So I organised one around children's rights and international development. I would have got a team if I could have, because doing the whole thing was a massive undertaking. And I have a background in public affairs and campaigning professionally, but it was still really stressful. And I learned a lot about kind of the different systems and how candidates actually work before they become an MP, and what they how they respond to people. Twitter was like a really big one for me, speaking to a lot of them through Twitter. And I got fairly good amount of people coming. So it was about 30 people turned up, and the candidates all turned up apart from the Brexit Party, who never responded to any of my messages. But and also the Labour Party, who Ellie Reeves, she was heavily pregnant and I think had just given birth, so that was fine. But she brought in a representative as well, so it was really good. And I wouldn't do 2 big public affairs events at the same time again, but yeah, it was good.
I think it's definitely a feat to pull off 2 in 1 week.
Yeah, they were literally 2 days apart.
Congrats. I was at the Vauxhall one and it was really well organised, really insightful to see the candidates' views on maintaining 0.7 and DFID. So yeah, thank you so much for organising.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Nice to hear from you. Sorry, myself. It's been really nice to hear from some of you that you've got meetings scheduled with your new or returning MPs. So do keep letting us know if you've got dates in the diary, what you're hoping to cover. Let us know if you need any help, or if you've already had meetings and you haven't mentioned it, yeah, get in touch. I wanted to highlight an opportunity that's coming up next month, which is a chance to get involved in a lobby or advocacy day in Parliament on the 12th of February. So the One campaign are organising this event, which is aiming to build support for a strong UK pledge to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, amongst MPs. The morning is planned to be briefings and training, and getting you inspired, and the afternoon will be a sort of open drop-in sessions for MPs. So you can invite your MP to come and have a meeting with you in Parliament. So if you can make it, or you're interested to hear more, do let me know. Drop us an email. It's a great opportunity, especially if you haven't done that sort of thing before, and you get to meet campaigners from other organisations as well. So do let us know. Just another update is that we're going to be starting to think about a spring training day over the next few weeks. It's most likely going to be in March, so we'll let you know when we've got more details. And Yeah, just lastly, you may have seen this in Aaron's Christmas message just before Christmas, sent out via the mailing list. But we put together a sort of poster that illustrates some of the really nice campaigning work you've all been up to throughout 2019. So I'll put a link in the chat box to that document. We're hoping to get some printed soon as well. I found it's quite a nice thing to use if you're explaining what results campaigners do to new volunteers. So it might be a nice resource for you. Yeah, I think that's it from me. Just keep letting us know any campaigning you've been up to, and thanks so much, as always. Back to you, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Della. Always good to hear what the network's been up to, and I guess really also just to add my thanks to everybody that's been in action. It's really, really great to hear about all of those really impactful things. So look, straight on to the topic, well, the dual topics of tonight's call. We're going to start with the reason for our current concern about a possible DFID merger with the Foreign Office, then follow that with a discussion about how to have a successful replenishment of funding for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. And then having heard a couple of questions, opening questions on each of those topics, we're going to open the floor to anybody on both of them. So I'm going to introduce the guests and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how we're going to run it all. So it's really my pleasure to introduce, first of all, Al Russell, Senior Public Affairs Advisor at Save the Children. Welcome, Al. Now, Al's going to guide us through the latest intelligence on the risks to keeping DFID as an independent department as an essential part of the UK's continuing to deliver world-class international development programs. Hi, Al. Let's see if I can find you with all these millions of faces I have on the screen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Ah, there you are. Hi, Al. Yes, I can hear you very well. Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. So is it helpful for me to just kind of introduce myself a bit and give a bit of context? And then
I'm going to come back to you to do that in just a second, because I'm going to introduce I'm going to do a little mini introduction to our other guest as well, because our other guest is another good friend of Results, Seb Meany, Head of Strategy, UK Strategy at Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, who's going to brief us on the current Gavi replenishment moment and what this means for our advocacy at Results over the next few months. Seb, I did spot you earlier, so I know you're on the call. Where is your, there you are, there's your face there. Hi, Seb. Hi. Oh. You went straight back on mute, I think. You might have double-clicked the little button. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. Excellent to be with you, Aaron.
Yeah, hi, Seb. Wonderful.
Hi.
So look, first of all, to both of you, thank you for being with us and for giving up part of your evenings to share your expertise with the network. You're on a call with a committed group of volunteer campaigners and advocates from right across the UK, from Scotland to the South Coast. Some have been active on global poverty issues for decades, some of who are brand new this evening and are even new to Results, but all are united by a passion to make a real difference, and we're all keen to hear from you on how we can do that. So what I'd like to do with both of you, and we'll start with you, Al, is to ask you to introduce yourselves and what your role is, just briefly, and it's really nice to ask people what got you into this work and what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning and do this really important work that you do to overcome global poverty. So Al, do you have a couple of words for us on that?
Sure. So yeah, I'm in the public affairs team at Save the Children UK, and we're maybe obvious to some of you, but may not be, the team that is the kind of interface between the organisation, which is obviously a massive, big global NGO focused on child rights and health and education and poverty and that kind of stuff in 120 countries. We're the kind of interface to UK politics. So we're the team that kind of talks to politicians in the UK about our work, but more importantly about their work, about the government's work, and how the UK government can make more difference to for children in some of the poorest places in the world. And I guess in terms of the kind of inspiration side of it, so I used to work in Parliament before, and when I was on the other side of the fence, if you like, I was really conscious of seeing the work that was being done by a load of amazing organisations, particularly in the international development sector that I was interested in, and really keen to kind of use that experience that I gained of working in politics to kind of try and make a difference, I guess, rather than to sit there answering emails from constituents.
Thanks, Al. It's very candid and really wonderful to hear how you're getting involved in stuff that really is making a difference in the world. It's heartening. Seb, do you have a few words? For some reason, you don't seem to be able to stay off mute, Seb.
Okay, hopefully I'm there with you now. I'm really sorry about this.
No,
Every
you're good.
time I hit unmute, it seems to mute me again. Anyway, I'm Seb Meany. It's really wonderful to be with you all this evening. I really appreciate all the work that you do and the time that you're spending. So I'm been with Gavi now for 3 years. I'm in the resource mobilization team. I'm responsible for our UK strategy. That is our relationships across the UK, on the political side, on the government side, on the civil society side, on the private sector side. So everything that we do which impacts onto the UK, I'm responsible for. I used to work for the UK government, so I actually used to work for DFID. So it's an institution that's close to my heart. I think they do amazing work. I don't want to affect Al's preamble, but it's an institution which really does do fabulous work across the world. And before that, in terms of inspiration, I've been fortunate to live and work in various different parts of the world. So having seen firsthand and worked firsthand in poverty alleviation in places like Central African Republic, DRC, Suriname, Jordan, Iraq, it's nice to be doing what I'm doing at a scale which is unimaginable, if you like, when you're working in places like that. So what we at Gavi do, and I'll come on to that a little bit more, is work at a scale that no single country or organization can work on alone. So being able to be here and be a part of that is the inspiration that drives me every day.
Thanks, Seb. That's great. So look, as we normally do on these calls, we've got a couple of pre-prepared questions to get the ball rolling. We're going to go to Birmingham, Brighton, Poole and Sheffield for those. Glad to see you guys are all on the call. After that, we are going to then go out to questions from the network. For those of you that are online and you're quite capable of typing in questions or observations in the chat box at any time, we'll go to those. For those of you that are on the telephones that will prefer to text in a question or WhatsApp or anything like that, you can do that tonight on 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178. Or you will hopefully also be able to do the old-fashioned take yourself off mute and yell out, "I've got a question." We'll create some space for that as well. But let's go straight into the preloaded questions. I believe we're going to Birmingham for that, and the first question's for Al. If you could just introduce yourself, that would be really helpful. Birmingham.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me? Hi. My name's Caroline Hurd. I'm the group leader of the Birmingham group, long-time listener and participant. I have my first question. Why is some UK aid money currently spent by government departments other than DFID? Is it realistic to ask that DFID oversees all of the government's aid spending going forward? Thank you.
Great. Shall I dive straight in? So that's
yes, please.
A key question, I think, in this whole debate, because lots of you might know that DFID is obviously the department responsible for the aid budget and the bulk of aid spending. However, it only spends about 70% of the aid budget, and about 30% is spent across other different departments. So that's something that's been happening increasingly since about 2015, when the coalition government introduced an aid strategy, and that was at a time when there was a real tightening of the belt in domestic departments. But David Cameron and George Osborne had said they wouldn't cut the aid budget while they were cutting other budgets. Andrew Mitchell, who was Secretary of State for International Development at the time, used the phrase, they didn't want to balance the books on the backs of the world's poorest. So they said, yes, we'll cut other budgets, but we won't cut the aid budget. So what this meant by the time it got to 2015 was actually you ended up in a position where other government departments were really feeling the pinch, but DFID wasn't. And although this was a kind of there was a kind of noble motive behind this, the government increasingly realised that they were worried it was unsustainable from the perspective of keeping everyone on side really within government, keeping their other departments happy. So what they did was came out of this aid strategy which said, we will look to spend more of the aid budget through other departments. And I think there's pros and cons to that. One of the pros is that what it does is brings in a lot of expertise from other government departments that DFID doesn't have, and it allows DFID to broaden the issues that it allows the UK government to broaden the issues that it can work on. For example, a lot of aid spending on climate change is channeled through the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which is the department responsible for climate change. One of the difficulties of it is when you start to think about objectives, because obviously DFID is a department that has got international development objectives. So it's focused on alleviating poverty, responding to crises, and that kind of stuff. And so when it's spending the aid budget, it's really spending against those objectives. When other departments are spending part of the aid budget, although there are criteria that they have to meet in order for it to be considered aid, their objectives are not the same as DFID. So for example, the objective of the Foreign Office really is to promote the national interest abroad, to promote British interests, diplomacy, and to kind of create that British presence in countries all over the world, which obviously is a really important role. However, it's not as directly relevant to international development, which means that when sometimes they see a way, departments like the Foreign Office, for example, see a way in which they could tick the aid box, use aid spending for something that otherwise they would probably try and do anyway. So something that doesn't really meet what you or I might consider to be kind of a legitimate use of aid. It means that actually you've got bits of the aid budget then that aren't making the same kind of impact in alleviating poverty and tackling disease and all that kind of stuff that they would if they were spent through DFID. And I think quite often it has difficult repercussions in terms of public support for aid as well, because it was really interesting hearing someone talk about their letter to the Daily Mail earlier, and the coverage of aid in the Daily Mail. And for example, very often, if you see a paper like the Daily Mail do a big story on, the aid budgets being wasted and the programs that they'll refer to, very often, actually, if you look at it, will be not DFID programs. There'll be programs from other departments. So they might be Foreign Office programs, or they might be from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. They might be from elsewhere in government, because as I say, they don't have those objectives of alleviating poverty, tackling disease, etc. To any member of the public, seeing that that's how the aid budget's being spent, often they say, hang on a minute, that's not really what I want my taxes spent on if you're calling it aid. So that's the kind of background, I guess, to the issue. And as we look at whether DFID ends up merged with the Department for International Development, which obviously is something we're worried about the possibility of at the moment, I think it's one of the most important arguments we can be making is the difference between DFID's ability to be effective as an aid donor and that of other departments. So not only does it have those objectives of aid spending, but it has that experience and skills and expertise going back to when it was founded over 20 years ago, in focusing aid on alleviating poverty, tackling disease and this kind of stuff. Whereas other government departments only in the last kind of 4 years have really had any significant role in aid spending, and by and large have been spending it in ways that make less of an impact against those objectives. The other thing I think that just to touch on is transparency. So one of the reasons that DFID is so well renowned internationally is the level of scrutiny and transparency of its aid spending is much higher than most of its peers, most other aid spending departments, not only in the UK but internationally. So there's a review published every year into transparency of aid donors, and DFID scores very, very highly. They've got a website where they publish details of all their programs. You can see, what are my taxes being spent on? Is it working? Is it not? And when aid is spent by other government departments, they're set up to be able to effectively show you as a taxpayer how your money's being spent is much, much worse. So our certainty, both as taxpayers and as an NGO that's interested in these issues, our certainty that that money is worthwhile and that impact is happening as a result of it is much, much lower. And the government has committed to improving that across government, but they've got a long way to go to get other departments anywhere near the level that DFID's at. So again, if we're thinking about the possibility of a merger, all of these things, the objectives, the transparency, the experience and expertise, all of those things are at a lower level in the Foreign Office than they are in DFID. So the big worry is if aid were being spent in the Foreign Office, then that would reduce those standards.
Thanks, Al. That's a really comprehensive answer, and a great place for us to pause and head over to Brighton for the second question.
Yeah, hi, this is Yoasha from the Brighton group. We wanted to ask, what is a cabinet level minister and why is it important for DFID to have one?
Thanks. Yeah, another, I think, really important one in getting to the bottom of this question about what could happen to DFID. So currently, the cabinet, which is the cabinet are the secretaries of state in government, the senior ministers, basically kind of the top team of ministers. So people like Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, and obviously Alok Sharma, the Secretary of State for International Development. And there's, off the top of my head, I think kind of 23 ministers in the cabinet. So one of the top 23 politicians, essentially in government, is the person responsible for international development and responding to humanitarian crises and thinking about how to alleviate poverty and tackle disease. If DFID didn't have a Secretary of State, it would mean that those concerns weren't being heard at that top table around government. They may be represented by somebody else. So, for example, if DFID were to be merged with the Foreign Office, it may be that the Foreign Secretary then had responsibility for, representing humanitarian concerns at cabinet. But the difference would be that if the Foreign Secretary were first the Foreign Secretary and second the person responsible for international development, then they're always considering the national interest and British diplomatic objectives ahead of international development priorities. And they'd essentially be kind of pitting the interests of the world's poorest people against what's best for Britain. And actually at the moment you have a setup where, of course, there's kind of difference in ranking around the cabinet table realistically, but you do have one person whose job it is to make the case for diplomacy and pushing the British national interest abroad, and one person who's there got just as much of a reason to be there as anyone else, whose job is making the case for our aid work and the difference we make in the world's poorest countries. I think one of the other things on that is not just around the cabinet table and how those concerns are represented across government, but also internationally. So currently we've got somebody at the highest level in government who can go to meet prime ministers and presidents abroad to talk about international development. They can go to the UN to talk about international development. They've got that level of kind of seniority and respect of being a Secretary of State and a senior cabinet minister, that they can get places essentially that junior ministers can't. They can make the case to people that junior ministers can't, and they carry a lot more sway. And I think from a British influence perspective, there's benefit in it as well, because you're maximizing the number of senior people who have influence on the international stage for the British government. So you don't just have one foreign secretary who's the kind of the person that goes to the UN or the person that goes abroad. You've got two people with distinct roles, and I think that gives you kind of more sway, as I say, not just at kind of in country, but places like the UN as well. And it really sends a clear signal about the role of the UK internationally. We have somebody at that top level in government for whom international development and humanitarianism is the absolute priority. So it sends a very clear message about what Britain's interests and role are on the world stage and how seriously we take international development. And it's a really important part of our kind of leadership globally in this field.
Thanks, Al. That's great. Really, that's really clear. And I think, you know, one of the really important things, of course, is that, you know, once we have an independent DFID, what do we do with it? Why is it so important that we have this? And what are the kind of things that we can achieve with that focus and diplomacy, which really, I think, it leads in quite well to question 3, which is going to go to Seb from, I believe, from Poole.
Hello, yes, I'm Helen and I'm the Poole Group leader. Seb, why is it important that the UK continues to fund such a big share of Gavi's work?
Seb, you're having problems with your mute button again, I'm afraid. I don't know quite what's going on there.
I'm trying to unmute you as a host and it doesn't seem to be working.
Okay, I think I'm on now.
Yeah, you're on, Seb. Go for it.
Okay, it's really bizarre. I apologize to everybody, but every time I press unmute, it seems to go back to mute. Anyway, it's working now. Thank you, Paul, for the question. I think there's a really long answer and there's a really short answer. And I think the essence of why it's important that the UK continues to fund such a big share of Gavi's work is because Gavi has delivered and does deliver for all of the people and countries which it is there to support. I think it's worth just mentioning in that respect the kind of scale that we've achieved over the 20 years that we've been in existence. And it's worth mentioning that this is a really exciting year for Gavi because we just turned 20. We were founded 20 years ago. And the UK was one of our 6 founding government donors and has been sort of steadfast in support to us since that time. So the UK has always had a really important and influential role in how Gavi has developed and where it is today and what it wants to do in future. So if we think about that in numbers, what we are doing at the moment is we're in a period where we are looking to immunize 300 million children. So far, we have reached 760 million children since we started. We've saved 13 million lives. That's in 18 years. And for the next period that we're asking the UK for funding for, we'll plan to reach another 300 million children. We'll save 7 to 8 million lives, and we'll continue to reduce the poverty that arises from children and families having a burden of health and vaccine preventable disease, which means that they cannot progress. Their lives continually go back into poverty, and vaccines really do protect lives. The other really, I think, important, I don't want to throw loads of data out there, but a really important point, and one of the reasons why the UK has made such big investments in Gavi, and hopefully will continue to do so with your help, is that return on investment. So the direct benefits to families and communities of the vaccines provided by Gavi are £21 for every pound that is input into Gavi. That's a huge return on investment. If you then extrapolate then to the broader societal benefits, so how that helps the economies of the countries that Gavi is supporting, and we work in around 60 poorer countries, then that number becomes 54 to 1. So what that means for DFID, for the UK government, is that that investment really is both poverty reducing, health affirming, and prosperity inducing. It means that these countries are able to, at a very low cost, stand on their own 2 feet and move forward. So one other really key point here, and I think it goes a little bit back to the conversation we were having about why reducing poverty is in the UK national interest, is that this contributes, if we have the money we need to spend in the next 5 years, so 21 to 25, which is what this replenishment is all about, it's a 5-year replenishment, will contribute another $80 to $100 billion in economic benefits to the countries that we support. That is a really, really fabulous return on investment for the aid dollars. There's lots and lots of important things that DFID can do with its money. You know, Aaron, you talked about nutrition. There are plenty of important investments that the UK can make in development. But what Gavi can do is to deliver really at scale the kind of change we would like to see, that's moving towards countries really standing on their own 2 feet, making investments in things which are low cost and impactful, in a way that it is hard for other investments to make. And I think that's, you know, that's how Gavi has developed over time. We started with great humility. We started relatively small. We started with an impactful idea, but since then we have been able to grow exponentially the reach that we have achieved over time. And you can really see how that's feeding through to countries, their health. We've protected one generation. We've protected a generation that were born post 2000 right up until today. And what we would like to do is protect the next generation. And that's really important. We also know that the Sustainable Development Goals are really important to the UK. Gavi touches on 14 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The linkages between vaccines and other important priorities for the world are all there. So if we can succeed in what we do with vaccines, and we have a way to go, we're reaching 81% of the population with a trace of vaccines. We want to reach 100% of the children. It's harder the further you go out. We call those the zero-dose children. So that's our challenge for the next 10 years. But if we can achieve that, then I sincerely believe we can really get to 2030 in a way that meets some, if not all, of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this is a really, really smart investment for the UK to make.
Thanks, Seb. Which takes us quite well onto question 4, which I think is coming from Sheffield.
Hi. Hi. What is the UK's role as host of the Gavi Replenishment Conference in June?
Thank you, Sheffield. It's a good question, and it's one that we are working closely with the UK government with, as you can imagine. So the UK Replenishment Conference, as you've noted, is happening in June. It's an opportunity to bring together the world and those who really value immunization. It's an opportunity to tell the story about Gavi, which is a slightly complicated alliance partnership model. So, you know, it's a partnership between Gavi as the funding organization, the United Nations agencies like UNICEF and WHO, with who support the countries in which we operate, vaccine supply companies from developed countries and developing countries, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where Aaron is today, technical and research institutions, and developing countries, most importantly, and of course, donors. So all of those constitute the constituent parts of Gavi, and they will come to London and they will make pledges in their different ways to support Gavi. So what is important for the UK as role is to convene this important meeting. As I noted earlier, we don't do this very often. This is something we do every 5 years. So we're raising the funds to pay for the next 5 years of programming. I'm glad we don't do it more often than every 5 years, because it's extremely hard work for everybody involved, but deeply important. It means we can plan our programs. It means we can invest our money really optimally for the next 5 years. So the UK's role is one not only of leadership in funding, it is also about its diplomacy and its ability to corral others, particularly DFID's role in corralling other donors. We know exactly the minimum amount of funding that we're going to need to achieve all of the things that I've described in brief on this call for the next 5 years. So we can very much link our impact to the funding that we need. So we need them to advocate for and use their diplomatic networks to ensure that other donors are able to step up and make the contributions that we need to achieve the fundraising target. That's an extremely important role, and one that we want everyone to share in, but particularly those with, the visibility, diplomatic networks, and the ability to influence high-level people to make sure that other countries come in.
Seb, can I just ask? I mean, I think this is maybe something for Al as well. I mean, and maybe Al, you wanna say something to this as well. I mean, that's a lot harder if we don't have a Secretary of State that's focused on development, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a very easy question, and I think, as Seb says, one of the really important things in development is a diplomatic network, particularly for a kind of leader like the UK. The UK does a lot of work in convening other donors and other countries to make a difference in international development. But critically, that's not something really that the Foreign Office does. It's something that that DFID works with the Foreign Office's diplomatic network to do. But it's about that leadership, and having an independent department and a Secretary of State is a really powerful symbol of that leadership.
Thanks. Sorry, Seb, I sort of jumped in halfway through your answer.
No, that's all right. No, it's good to link these things. But I think that's right. I mean, I think, though, it has to be said that given the numbers of countries in which we need to advocate, in many, it will be really the DFID networks that count. But in some, it's also the Foreign Office networks that complement that work, because not everywhere does DFID have offices, whereas the Foreign Office does. So we're really seeing this as a joint effort. I'm really delighted at the work that DFID are putting in to work through the diplomatic networks. In fact, all networks of government, it isn't only about DFID and the Foreign Office. Of course, the Department of Health and Social Care has a role to play. The Treasury potentially has a role to play. All of them have networks that can be influenced for the benefit of that which Gavi is seeking to achieve for the next 5 years. So the UK has that role, which is the sort of public and private advocacy, the hosting role, and of course, what we are wanting to do together as well is raise visibility in the public through good campaigning and good media, through work with yourselves and others, to ensure that the visibility for the power of immunization and what that can achieve for poverty reduction and prosperity and the improvement of people's lives overseas is central to that work for the next 4 or 5 months. To some extent, I think, it's very unfortunate, but we are seeing outbreaks of diseases like measles again across the world. And this is, I reiterate, really unfortunate, but I think it is also helping to raise the importance and visibility of immunization and the absence of immunization and what that can lead to. So it's an interesting time, and yeah, it's great to work with the UK government as our lead donor, as such a force for good in development, and with the networks that it has. So I really look forward to the next 6 months, and I look forward to all of your support. And thanks for the question.
Cheers, Seb. Thank you. Now, look, we've got only for about 5 minutes, and I really do need to dash because I have another meeting starting at the top of the hour. I'm going to have to finish spot on. So 2 questions. One's come from Results Norwich. Is Seb hoping for an early pledge from DFID? If so, when would he think this pledge would be announced? And another question for Seb from Jill, which I think might also be interesting to get Al's opinion on, is having FCO involvement a real positive for influence?
Respecting the time, so early pledge from the UK, yes, I think in general we are looking for early pledges to create the momentum that we would like to see across many donors, the UK included. I don't know yet where or when that might be, but that is something that is important. I think that's something we all learned as well from the Global Fund replenishment, that momentum around early pledges and pushing countries to come up early and come up ambitiously sets a really good pattern for others, and also sets a really good tone for the replenishment event when it actually comes. The second question, Aaron, sorry, I missed it.
The FCO involvement being positive in terms of influence.
Yes, it is. So, I mean, one of the things that there are certain regions of the world where, and Al, I can't remember if you went into this, but DFID and the Foreign Office share ministers. So a couple of the junior ministers are shared between Foreign Office and DFID. One in particular is responsible for global health and for the Middle East. His name is Dr. Andrew Morrison. And his influence in the Middle East from a Foreign Office perspective is also really helpful for us from a DFID global health perspective, in the sense that that's a region where we're looking for donors to step up.
Al, do you want to add a little to that?
Not a great deal, just to echo that, I think. And it's a good example of where DFID and the Foreign Office can work well together, but retaining kind of distinct roles. And I think one of the cases people make to merge them is, oh, they need to work much more closely together. But actually, if you stop to look at the work they do, and in a lot of places, their staff are in the same offices, and as Seb says, they've got a lot of ministers that work jointly across the 2 departments. So actually they do work pretty well together, understanding the different roles they play and how they can complement each other.
I would just add to that it's perhaps more by design and for us a happy accident that the minister for whom is the Foreign Office responsible for the Middle East is also the minister responsible for global health at DFID. There may not be those deliberate overlaps, but in this particular instance, I would say that's a helpful to our work.
Great, thanks both. Look, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to have to leave. I have another meeting starting in just 1 minute. We're here at the Gates Foundation offices. So normally I'd try and squeeze an extra 5 minutes out of the call to get another couple of questions, because I'm sure there are loads of people that have many other things that they'd like to ask you both. And I've actually been chatting away to Naveed in the background, thinking that maybe we need to think about having slightly longer grassroots calls each month, because we always do seem to run out of time with so many good things still to discuss. So we may be asking you all whether you think that would work, or whether it's just us that's getting excited and you guys are all like done with it and want to get off the call. But I think you'd be keen. Anyway, look, we have come to the end of our time together on this call tonight. I really do want to say If you do have any other questions that haven't been answered, of course, send them into the office via any staff and we'll do our best to get them answered. You know, maybe even give us a phone call. We can help you figure anything out that's still unclear. But I do want to say a really, really big thank you to both Al and Seb for joining us this evening, for sharing your insights on all these important challenges and opportunities, and for the work of overcoming global poverty, which we're all obviously still incredibly keen to keep working on. For those of you in our grassroots, I hope many of you will be able to take our current monthly action. It was emailed to you at the end of last week. It's on our website. If you haven't arranged to visit your MP, please do so if you can. They're actually all quite nice people. They depend on you to vote for them. If you've quite recently met them, then follow that up with a letter, either about the importance of retaining DFID as an independent, effective government department, or about DFID support for Gavi, or preferably both. How you tackle that is of course up to you, but as usual, we've included some suggestions for talking points and resources about how to run an effective meeting, and we hope you've also been inspired and informed by our guest speaker tonight. Speakers, I should say. I've really enjoyed tonight's call. I hope you both have as well. Thanks again to the speakers. Looking forward to seeing all of you again on the evening of Tuesday, the 4th of February, just 3 weeks from now. So it's good night from me, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thanks a lot.